Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Splinter Cell hard difficulty video walkthrough. This is the second part to Kalinatek, and things are really starting to get quite tricky in this area. So, I have a bunch of different strategies to get through it. Sometimes they work, sometimes there's ambiguity to them. The first real bit of ambiguity is whether or not a guy sees you when we move into a certain room. At the beginning there, I've intentionally moved quickly and been seen by those two fellas, so I'll lure them out of the room. I do this in hopes of separating them, isolating them, and taking them down. But I'm going to do this in a very specific way. I'm going to wait for the last guy to pass, I'm going to grab him as a meat shield, and I'm going to carry him down this corridor and into a little sleeping quarters. So there's that. All of this has to be timed quite promptly. If you're too slow, the other guy will see you and he'll start shooting. If you're too fast, sometimes the patterns of the people in these next rooms will alternate and you'll bump into them, or you'll be waiting for longer than you thought you would. This is going to be really tight here. We're going to get into this bathroom / sleeping area just through here, and the corridor we're on right now, a guard is going to walk around it. So I'm going to put my back against this wall and hope he doesn't see me. Like so. At this point, depending on how quick you were, will depend on where he is. I'm going to try and pick this guy up, and he turns up, but he walks past. You notice that? Sometimes he will stop at that doorway, and he'll see the body. Other times he'll walk past. I have absolutely no idea why he does those things, and I had no way to guarantee that he did the one I wanted. So I watch him now, he wanders off, and then I continue through the level. That is pretty much the most random part of this method I'm showing you. I had it work 3 times, but 2 of those attempts in between, he did a different thing, and I got spotted. So if you're having any difficulty there, folks, it's literally down to the RNG of the AI, and it can be quite tricky. Like just then. You'll notice the music kicked off because he saw me technically, but I also grabbed him, and because it was only him and there was nobody in close proximity to work the hive mind bullshit, no alarm. So I shoot the light out to make him a little bit less visible, pick up his satchel, because you never know what it's going to contain. It could be the code for a door you have to enter, and then we're going to hit the computer, it opens up the next sequence, and we can move on. That is a pretty tough area, and you'll also notice a couple of guys are coming back now. There are 2 soldiers that seem to alternate walking this path, and their paths can sometimes seem to change, so you want to just be very aware of them, use your technology to the best you can, and sneak your way out of this area. But in the last video I was talking about realism in games, and I think there's a market for that kind of game. Just look at the flight simulators for, you know, your budding aviators, just like your big wheeled truck simulation games. There's a lot of different simulations, but it's a very niche market for that kind of measure of realism. For the most, we want a believable amount of realism, but we also want the ability for disbelief, because if it's too real, it's not as fun. You know, nobody wants the real experience unless it's something very specific or technology that we don't have at this moment. So whenever anybody gives, you know, a lot of flexibility to something that is bad design and calls it realistic, it just makes me yawn, because it's not an argument at that point. You're not even arguing. You're not giving a good point. You're not putting forward compelling evidence to state anything. You're just saying, you know, it is because it is. And I've always found that to be very flawed thinking, even if you like it. I'd rather you have no opinion or no real defense than that, because that one to me is it just nullifies all conversation. But sneak into the toilet with this guy. He's going to remember this experience for the rest of his life. Clop him out and then climb into this vent. Be very careful in this vent. For some reason, it's probably all the jumping you have to do to get in it, and sometimes this game just doesn't want to mantle. It's an absolute nightmare. But the guy in this next room can sometimes spin on the spot, know exactly where you are, and shoot you. So don't even mess around, don't give him the benefit of the doubt, just take him out. I use a sticky shocker because I'm going for no lethal kills. On Pandora Tomorrow there's a section where you have to kill people, and I couldn't remember that at all. It's at the very end of the game, you have to kill terrorists, you know. You have to be a good guy, it's ridiculous. And I nearly failed too, because I put them all to sleep, and then the timer was still ticking down, and I thought I had to defuse the bomb, but it turns out I didn't. I had to kill them. But talk to Mr. Ivan, He tells you what you need to know. Good old Michael Ironside lays down some lines, and then we can push on through the building. I must admit too, I think probably the saddest thing about the concept of a sequel for Splinter Cell at this point is the fact that we're going to get that shit guy again to voice him. And I think that's why, as much as I think Blacklist is a brilliant game, I don't really look at it as a Splinter Cell game, which is kind of bizarre considering it has a lot of the ingredients that make them Splinter Cell. It's that lack of Ironside. That lack of Ironside makes everything, apparently, for me. And the gameplay in that game is so good. The setup, the premise. Like, the only problem with that game is those first-person shooter sections where you play as that black dude for no reason other than, you know, ethnic diversity. Which doesn't even make any sense. Because the game is stellar and flawless up to that point, and then it forces you into, arguably, some of the worst first-person shooting sections I've played in a very long time. Because Ubisoft haven't really done much with first-person shooting since Rainbow Six. And your dog, times have changed. Jesus Christ. You clunky-ass, ugly shooter. And it doesn't make much sense, because this game runs so well in third-person. Why would they push it into first-person, ever? Just seems very strange. This bit's tough though, and I have to talk about this. Whenever you get to the building site sections, it means shit's going to start kicking off. It was true in Max Payne 2, and it's true here. So for some really bizarre reason, I assume it's for pacing and cinematic reasons, they're going to be forcing a firefight on us, and it's a firefight you can't avoid. However, there are some really tricky things you can do to kill the enemies quickly, and to circumvent it. That being said, you're still dealing with AI on hard, which is essentially omniscient, perfect aim, massive damage. Incredibly dangerous variables. And I always find it strange, because isn't the point of us not to have our presence known? And if we're murking a bunch of dudes in a massive firefight, isn't that exactly what's going to happen? Always seems really strange, but it's something you have to put up with, and it's something that they do in all of the games. It's probably the worst in Chaos Theory, because there is a firefight coming up in that game. It's very close to the end of that game, in a shower, and goodness me, it was difficult. I think I can do it quite easy now, because I'm a much better player than I was back when I first played the game, because I bet smoke, and from then on using different equipment is probably going to be the key to that fight. But when you're young and you're kind of dumb and you're doing it like you've done every other game and you're just trying to walk through it all without shooting people and not using items and gadgets and what have you, it can be very tricky. So I had a really tough time getting through that area, and I used to hate it. And that's my favourite Splinter Cell too, so to hate that level fervently is not the thing I wanted to do, it's just the way it ended up happening. But as I've said, when we get to Chaos Theory, I reckon I can do that room now, because I think there'll be a couple of things I didn't think of that'll help me get through it, and that is arguably the worst firefight on any of them. Pandora Tomorrow has a tricky one in the labs. A couple of different incidents. A couple of times where the snipers are trying to kill you, and I didn't think you'd be able to stealth them as well as you can, but if you're really sneaky, you can do some pretty fun stuff with that, which you're going to see, because I've recorded that as of yesterday. I managed to knock out the end part. Such a fun game, Pandora Tomorrow. I think it still has some of the signs of the age that this one has, with the mantling and some of the detection and some of the wonkiness, but it's also got that next level of it that you see later on in Chaos Theory and then Double Agent. This is the mandatory fight. As soon as you move towards that doorway, you'll notice the music kicks off. These guys are going to rush this room, and all of them know where you are. So I'm going to hit them with sticky shockers, as I just did then. I recommend you save after every gunfight, because they can go south very quickly, and it's going to be concurrent gunfights coming up. They're all systematically more weird as well. The final one is like a massive kill fest, and you can stealth it, but it's kind of tricky. So at this point, I'm probably going to put grenades on, because I know when I run up these steps, it's going to trigger a bunch of guys, and I'm going to throw some grenades at them. But apparently I missed... Oh, there they are. A grenade refill. I noticed something strange as well last night. When I was throwing grenades on Pandora Tomorrow, he threw a crate. And I don't know if it's a crate of grenades or however that works out, but I couldn't remember the game working that way, and it was very strange. But you'll see when I make that walkthrough. So as soon as you enter this room, music's going to kick off, enemies are going to spawn, and they're going to spawn in that corner, so I throw a grenade and then I back up. Grenade goes off, and then we wait for people to set up. You're going to know that they're there because they're going to be shooting at you, and it's the kind of game where they will shoot at you perpetually, and they'll just keep on hitting the piece of cover that you're up against, because that's how the game tends to work. I move to this, which can break, by the way, so do not stay here too long. Also, if the enemies have grenades, and they do, and they throw one near you, if you do not move, you are dead. This might sound redundant, but in most games, you can generally work it to your own advantage. In this game, every single time, it was horrendous. But when you get into this room, you are safe from that firefight, and you can go back to being a ghost and stealth killing dudes. And I have a really interesting pattern here coming up, which was pretty panic-inducing at first, but then I made it work for me, because the enemies are really close together. So I came over here, put on the good old pistol, my 5.7, two dudes start walking this way. Make sure you save before this as well, because this is tough. This guy stands in the doorway, gives me his back, I grab him, and as I'm walking away, a guy passes me. Watch this. Look at that. Goodness me, thank God for shadows. I don't thank God for him, you know, there'd be more shadows if it weren't for God, because he did the whole creating the world and light and all that things, so thank the devil for shadows, because we wouldn't have been able to do that sequence at all. But he's down, his buddy's down, and then he's just walked out of the room, so you can shoot the lights out here, but be aware that the enemies can hear it and they can come exploring. The music's always going to be in a state of hostility, so you can't really pay too much attention to it. There's a guy directly over there. Do you see him behind that concrete pillar? Oh, come on, game. And it's funny with the shooting mechanics. I completely agree that you should not be able to aim well when you're moving. I think that's what makes any kind of serious military-esque shooter. It's just something that you shouldn't really be able to do. However, when you're perfectly still, your aim is centered, I think your bullet should go where your reticle is. I don't think there should be any dice rolls, any of that D&D bullshit. Just let it work. But you'll notice there's two guys there on the right. So I'm scouting it out a little bit, taking my time. This game is all about patience, folks. The cool things about Splinter Cell is if you're patient enough and you watch the patterns, you will find the gaps, you'll find things that make it work, and you'll be very successful. That right there was a ring airfoil round. I have avoided using those secondaries as much as possible because they're incredibly powerful when you know how to use them. If you hit them in the head, they'll go down in 1. If you hit them in the body, it'll take 2. You can pick them back up, which is the coolest aspect of them, so you can kind of recycle them. They're an inferior version of the Sticky Shocker. The Sticky Shocker is probably the best. So I'm going to try and clip out this corner and hit this guy. So you have to compensate for them. The arc on the ring airfoil rounds at a distance is quite extreme. See, that means I didn't hit him in the head. I didn't aim high enough. So that's an example of when it takes 2. If you want to make all your shots count and use as little items as possible, save before every shot. That way you can do perfect shots, and if you miss, you can just reload. I must warn you though, people have already told me, and I've already mentioned it, but this game has a proclivity towards crashing when you're saving, and a lot of people have had all their progress completely removed by crashed saves. So save at your own, risk, I should say. But the counter-argument I'm going to make, because I have to put 2 perspectives forward, is I had 2 game crashes on this during saves that ruined saves. However, they did not ruin the entirety of my saves, and I was saving frequently enough that it was never a big issue. Aside from that, I had no problem with trophies unlocking. I had no real other problems. And you might not either, so it's always best to be optimistic, I find. As much as the pessimist and the misanthrope of me likes to speak otherwise. But the music is still going, and it means there's still somebody alive. Music has just stopped, means we've got out of that sequence. And we're going to be moving into another action set piece. But they're going to get slightly easier from this point onwards, and then the final ones are just stupid. Oh, I tell a lie, this is a stealth section, this one. So in this area I tried a few different approaches. I tried taking it from the ground and working my way up. I tried taking it from up and then working my way down. I tried shooting the barrels to make them explode. A handful of different things. And in the end, I ended up doing it this way. So, there's my fantastic shooting. It gets him over to where I am, and then from here on out we can focus on hitting him with some different things. You can always tell when I've had a tricky time with a situation, or when I've been doing it a little bit longer than I want to be doing it, because I'll pull out the guns. And it doesn't even have to be in a tricky situation, or even a tough part of the level. It can be a part where I've tried a pattern that's worked really well, and then when I've tried to recreate it again, it hasn't worked, and it's frustrated me. So I've done things like that, where I blow barrels up, I shoot people in the face. Because at the end of the day, it's all effective. I just try to, do it a set way when I'm recording, and it isn't the way I always play. It's just one of those things when you start recording, you want to adhere to a higher standard, and these cutscenes are absolutely horrendous. It's so good. Considering the game has aged as well as it has, the cutscenes literally look like they were made by toddlers. It just... look at it. Even the cinematography's bad, like, the angles, everything, not good. And we know Ubisoft are a creative team. We even know they can make things look good, because the vignettes, which are incredibly low resolution, all have better direction than that did. That was really rough. That's like the guy who doesn't really understand film or composition of scenes, who knew how to move cameras in like 3D Studio Max, and they got him to do it because it had saved them money so they could focus it on other areas, which, if that's a conceit they have to do to make the gameplay good, I'm all for it. I'll have me some shitty cutscenes if the gameplay is better or more focused. But there's a couple people here. I'm going to shoot them because fuck them. They killed me a few times and are trying to climb up the scaffolding because they can shoot you through it and you can't even see them. So, time to get super business on them, put them down, and then progress onwards. Look at this. You gotta love it. Yeah, it's that kind of game, folks, but you've got to remember where we came from to appreciate where we are. So thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.